Harry Kane scored a very good point, to be fair.
Whether Southgate gets that combination right, I mean, taking off Saka last night looked a peculiar call, given how much he was getting out of Hernandez.
With the players they have, they're going to get over that line at some stage.
Giroud will do for France. Kane proves unable as the three lions go home, and it's now up to the Atlas Lions to tame the world champions. Daniel McDonnell was in L8. Dan, it's your fourth World Cup and the fourth time you've seen England exit. They seem kind of happier, albeit they are still going home.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. Yeah, like it's only when you said it to me, it's the fourth time you've seen England go out, or the fourth World Cup. You realise, yeah, you've witnessed a certain amount of England trauma, and he's probably go through it. Like 2010 was, Wayne Rooney was probably shouting on the camera against Algeria. Rob Green's fumble against the USA. Classic England, getting caught up in the moment when John Terry did one sort of brave diving header tackle against Slovenia, and they think they're going to do a job on a sort of vibrant Germany side, and they get hammered. 2014 actually played quite well against Italy in Manaus, but then lost to Uruguay, and that was it. The last game was Costa Rica dead rubber again, and now there wasn't actually. Yeah. There wasn't recriminations around Roy Hodgson at that stage because he got another crack, he got another campaign. 2018 was a semi-final, yeah, and that near miss, and then you bring it forward to last night, where Gareth Southgate said after they probably played as well as they ever have against a top nation under his watch, but they sort of end up with the same result. I mean, they have just an incredibly bad record in heavyweight clashes. When it comes to playing other perceived sort of top nations, tier one nations, or however you want to phrase it, in a sort of a really competitive, major tournament sphere, unless it's in England, they lose, and I feel like. That last night's game, I don't know what you thought. Like I thought in some ways it sort of had the personality of a final. I think there was a time when England thought they should be challenging on the basis of their name, but obviously didn't have a lot of the ingredients really to challenge, like the components of a team that would make it competitive.
Yeah.
Now it feels like they really have that. They have a reason to believe they probably should be winning tournaments or are good enough to win tournaments. Last night probably strengthened that view in some ways. But they're done. So it makes it a very difficult one for them to assess. But there's a different media vibe now. We touched on it with Dion, the preview. There's not that sense to that desire. I don't think it works really now to go after people. There's more a sense of like disappointment than bitterness, whereas like 2010 was bitterness rather than disappointment.
Yeah. They feel a little bit to me like, the way golfers would be that, they finish second and third and fourth in majors. They have chances and they don't quite get there. Or, a team that just, they need one tournament and they could possibly go on and win another one or two. They've been so long without one that they just found a way. They were really good in the second half last night. They had all the momentum, and then little 5-minute switch off, and they had a warning with that shot from Giroud that Pickford saved. And you thought, okay, they've got away with that. That's their warning. They're going to step it back up again. Suddenly, a brilliant ball in by Griezmann. Even the goal, they're unlucky. Like it comes off Harry Maguire and goes in, and then they're presented with a chance to get back into it. And it's just that thing. It sounds a strange thing to say about tournament football that France been world champions. It was just that little bit of, I don't know, a little bit of experience, a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of calmness or something that France were being overrun in the first 25 minutes of that half, and they just kept themselves in the game. We'll get a chance, we'll get a 5-minute spell, and they did. And I guess that 5-minute spell proved to be enough versus the other 50 minutes or 45 minutes of the second half that England just couldn't get. I mean, the golden chance comes and Kane sticks it over. The line on the ITV commentary was they needed Gary Lineker and they got Chris Waddle, which was, some people thought it was
Harsh,
crass. I thought it was quite a
harsh.
good line, but
Do you think?
on the
Oh,
moment, I
oh.
thought, like, I mean, I think the Lineker reference been the second penalty, against Cameroon and the difficulty of the second penalty. But look, it's one of those
Oh,
things. I'm
okay,
sure
okay.
the
Yeah.
commentator, like that was the reference I took about in terms of, the difficulty of taking the second penalty against Cameroon as Lineker did, and he smashed it down the middle. And he's spoken since about how it's so rare to get a second penalty that his brain was almost not fried, but there was so many thoughts going through his head, and he just thought to himself, right, I'm just going to smash it down the middle, and he did, and he scored. In Kane's case, look, I don't know if he's trying to be too exact or whatever. Um, it's fractional, and that's what you talk about. Technique. It goes way over the bar. That's the difference between of an inch of where he strikes the ball. Instead of going flying into the top corner, it goes flying over the bar, and they're gone. And you look at them, and they've an awful lot of talent coming through, but then so do Spain. And France France will still be around very much so in a couple of years, in 4 years, and it's just so difficult to win these major tournaments, because at some point, like the heavyweight clash, you gotta land a knockout punch. Like, if you want to take the boxing analogy, they possibly won on points last night, but
Mm.
they
Well,
got knocked
Kane,
down and they couldn't get back up again.
Harry Kane scored a very good point, to be fair. But yeah. I mean, I think, I mean, that moment, like the moment of the Kane penalty. I mean, like the atmosphere wasn't heaving in the stadium, right? Like, I mean, the one consequence of the quarterfinal results is that you will have two good atmospheres in the semi-finals, because Argentina are in
Yeah,
one and Morocco are in the other. Um, but I think I don't know, to sort of, probably at home, like you're listening to the commentary moments and stuff. I just feel it right on that. I feel it for Waddle a bit, because like in recent years, England haven't like demonized players for their penalty misses in the way they did previously. Like
yeah,
Saka and Rashford aren't really remembered for their 2020 ones, whereas Pearl Waddle, like 1990, it's like a remnant of a different era. It's like, oh no,
yeah,
here you are reminding whatever, however many people are watching of this. It's almost like a throwback to that sort of blame culture being associated with that penalty forever.
yeah,
I'm not sure if
yeah. That's
Harry.
a good
I
point.
mean, like I wrote about this, like Sunday night. Like, I think Kane will be probably haunted by this one for a while. He'll have all the images, the sort of the memes or whatever to get various sort of
Yeah,
graphics of it sent his way. But I still feel maybe it might linger as long as like the Waddle one did. Will it be talked about in 32 years? Maybe not. But um, I sort of still came away from last night and sort of thinking of angles maybe for like to write for a Monday piece, and I'm probably coming around to the idea of doing something about. Like, I think they're going to win one, England, and I probably feel more convinced of it now in a way by last night than not. Um, you still just have to look at their age profile of their team and the sheer volume of players. I know that Spain are coming to a degree, but like, look at France last night. I mean, they use one sub like Kingsley Coman. Like, you look at the bench, English bench is stronger. The players they have to bring
yeah,
on, like, you look at the number of top England players that are under the age of 25, whereas like even with France, they have some very good young players, right? But there's still a slight, like, look how influential Giroud still is. Look how
yeah,
influential Griezmann still is. Giroud, okay, is there as an alternative to Benzema now. I know there's a couple of decent, right? There's always going to be good players coming through,
yeah.
and
He's not young
Kunku.
either now as well. Yeah,
No, and Kunku is the one young player that's missing through injury that everyone is excited about in the striking department. But and I mean, Mbappe is still right; he's still incredibly young. But I just look at the sheer volume of young players, the under 25 in the England squad. When you think of sort of Rashford and Saka and Bellingham, like, is exceptional. Declan Rice is still only 23. Um,
23. Yeah,
Trent Alexander-Arnold's under 25, and that's just applying a very crude sort of measure to it.
yeah.
There's others as well, and the experience they've accumulated. Foden, I mean, oh my God, like, Foden.
Foden, yeah,
And then you look at the likes of Reece James, who's injured. I think he's an excellent player, so okay, Kyle Walker's 32, but Reece James is 23. So, um, And I mean, you can look further down, like they haven't felt the need to cap someone like Harvey Elliott, say, whereas other countries I think
Yeah,
would have capped Harvey Elliott on the strength of what he was doing for Liverpool this year. So they've got a lot of their stuff together at the underage level, with effectively like the Premier League wealth that exists has now been channeled towards player production at last,
yeah,
and it's not scattergun. So I sort of feel like, and that's probably the piece I'm probably right in my head, is it's almost like, okay, as Irish people, right? Just it's again like that chat with Dion. Like, what's the gut feeling during the game? Like, you can talk about how you should feel, and
yeah,
you may actually like the players and like the manager, and not have not revel in their misery, maybe. But is there still that gut feeling when that penalty goes over the bar? Like that. Tell me how you feel when that happened, and that's obviously how a lot of people, there's still a little sense of, oh my god, this has happened to them again. Um, but I think there's an element of like reveling in that while you can, like to a degree,
yeah,
because I just feel like in the same way that the Premier League is now like a monster that it's seen off a lot of its rivals in terms of its muscle. As much as international football is pure, you can't buy a team, you can't buy a trophy. I think certain things probably level out over time, and with the players they have, they're going to get over that line at some stage. I mean, maybe it's a Euros, maybe it's not a World Cup, but like in
yeah.
some kind of tournament in the next decade, I feel like they have to. As much as like I tweeted about a little stat about the teams they've beaten in World Cup knockouts last night, and then getting quite extensive feedback from various people around England who are informing me that Ireland have only beaten Romania in a knockout. I'm well aware of that.
Yes,
We're still actually celebrating it, but they don't realise is that
yeah,
Ireland are still celebrating that. But I mean, England as a nation, uh, the list of countries they've beaten in knockout games since 1966, for a powerful nation, and it's like Denmark, Ecuador, Senegal, Sweden, Paraguay, okay, Belgium from 1990 who were probably the best, Cameroon, maybe the one others, 8 of them, Sweden, I think. And like you look at like Morocco in the last week, Spain and Portugal,
yeah,
like Croatia, what they've done, they've knocked Germany out of a World Cup, they've knocked Brazil out of a World Cup, they've knocked England out of the last World Cup. Like, they don't have these wins on their resume, but I feel like, especially as like some of the better younger players that they have now are in like top club environments, they're going to get more practice at winning trophies, and it's got to
yeah,
translate to their team. I know that
yeah.
centre halves is an issue, right? There's there's you can look at elements of their production line and raise questions, but I don't know what you think, but I
Yeah, I
think
wonder with
they've got
that
a bit
where
there.
like the Champions League. I mean, Liverpool have won Champions League. City haven't, and
Mm,
I think someone like Foden winning a Champions League would translate hugely into a major competition for England. That kind of, as you said, the Premier League dominance is such that I think once they get over the line in the Champions League with City, you've got a few more teams there that are probably, they look like they're going to dominate that for the next 4 or 5 years as well. Whether they have enough to get over the line, is they couldn't do it last year with Real Madrid. Um, Similar to England, where on paper they had a lot of players who were better than their opponents for various. I mean, City getting knocked out by Madrid last year. For the vast majority of the game, they were better, but they couldn't get over the line. It kind of reminded
mm,
me of that a bit last night, where it's just the knockout punch that was missing. They are producing a lot of players. They're producing a lot of the same player. Is the only
that is
sort of slight
true.
thing that you'd say,
That is true.
where you look at that kind of three behind Harry Kane, and you have Saka, Foden, Mount. I think Mount is the oldest of those, and he's 23.
Yeah, I
You've
forgot about
Conor
that.
Gallagher, you've Emile Smith Rowe,
Yeah.
who's not in the all these guys that are very very young, and okay, Rice is there, Bellingham's there. They're going to be the two midfielders for a long time. But it's they're definitely the recriminations aren't there simply because the hope is there for the future. Now, whether Southgate gets that combination right, I mean, taking off Saka last night on certainly from the screen, whether it looked from watching on TV, looked a peculiar call,
It,
given
it
how much he was getting out of Hernandez. But whether his numbers were down in terms of sprints and all that, you don't know. You don't know. They have access to data that obviously we don't. So, but it did, and Ian Wright was the only one who slightly alluded to it as a potential kind of criticism. But everything else was, we've done great and we're a bit unlucky.
Yeah, no, I think you could say that was definitely questionable call. But I'm trying to think. I mean, so the Saka, because they brought on Mount, right? It was Mount and Sterling, wasn't it? Was that substitution? I'm sort of having a. I'm sure it was all a bit sort of manic in my head here because
Yeah, I
they
think
brought on
Sterling
Grealish
came
and
on for,
Rashford later on. Yeah, like
yeah.
I mean, like they did make that double sub. All I'm saying from Southgate's perspective is like they made a double sub immediately after conceding. And like one of the
Mm-hmm.
players that come on as part of the substitution did then win a penalty like straight away, um, and if Kane scores it,
That was Mount for Henderson was one you
yeah,
kind of understood.
okay, yeah. So you made
Sterling
it,
for Saka a little bit less so.
yeah. I mean, I understand that. I mean, like, I think, I think it's a valid criticism, right? But it's still a small bit of a reach. Like, I mean, Sterling did in his time on the pitch, he had one or two little darts down the right, like,
Mm-hmm.
and it could have led to something. And as I said, like the Mount change, like resulted in a penalty. But I understand the criticism. Like the Southgate one, I mean, like he is so measured. Like he doesn't want to get like we haven't mentioned the referee yet, for example,
Yeah.
which maybe other people might have sort of seized on that as a distraction or deflection technique. He refuses to do that. Like he gives a very sort of mature answer about his future in a
Mm-hmm.
sense, very nuanced about I don't want to make decisions now. Like, he's speaking more about the mental load of going again rather than the wanting to go again. It's knowing the demands of it, and it does like make you more sympathetic to him. And I think the room is very sympathetic to him. And
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's just skillful media management as well too, right? Like to be totally cynical about it. But
Yeah.
I suppose the question is, and this is I suppose with any country and their managerial position, there's a case of okay. Do you think this manager is the one that's best suited to these players, having been sort of, part of their evolution? Or is it an absolute given that someone else
Yeah.
will come in and improve this because there might be a little bit more a higher level coach in the sense of how they might be perceived in a club category, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like in a way, right? Like I'm a little bit torn over this one myself in the sense of like I think like Southgate is a big part of like their success. I know Gary Breen will touch on this in his column. He thinks that Gary Breen thinks that Southgate is a big part of
Yeah.
the environment, like the unity that English teams didn't have, the sense of calm. If they were to say decide not to go with Southgate, or he was to decide himself not to go, and they suddenly went for say, and the names like a Pochettino or a Tuchel or something, and all of a sudden you have a
Yeah.
big name coach. Particularly Tuchel is more known as a quick hit impact guy, say, but what if it doesn't click straight away, and does it then become a little bit more toxic around them than it does around Southgate because
Yeah.
there's a
They've
sense
done
of
that before.
we've
Yeah.
had your foreign, like we've given it to the foreign coach here, but now all of a sudden it's not, you're not delivering, and can that change the mood and remove a component that's helping them in some ways? And like it's the stick or twist, right? Like it's a sort of a
Mm-hmm.
gambler's decision. It's like we think that like right in the here and now this person might be the best, but this could be better. But if it's worse, like it could lose a part of the atmosphere that makes things pretty calm around them. But then is it too calm? Maybe do they need that now?
Yeah.
Are they high level enough performers that work for Pep and Klopp, or and demanding people who are perceived as more demanding, that they can actually withstand it now? Whereas previously, like you did have big name managers come in, but there was maybe strong characters in the dressing room who didn't have the right attitude to respond to
Yeah.
that. So it's sort of very very interesting one in some ways.
Yeah. You obviously spent a lot of time there talking about England, probably because we won't get a chance to talk about them again. France will
Yeah,
come back to, but speaking, you mentioned referees and their performances. Pepe was fairly damning about the referee in the Portugal Morocco game, as if the referee had been the one who missed a header from 4 yards to equalise it with a couple of minutes to go. It was utterly bizarre take on the game.
yeah, yeah,
Portugal went home without really, if you take England's positivity and how well they played, Portugal went home without we keep coming back to boxing knowledge. I'm not sure why, but without landing a blow.
Yeah, but it's almost as well. It's like the teams that like pummel someone in the second round. It's like they peak too early. Like look at Brazil and Portugal, like running up a number, and then it sort of does it breed like a false sense of security. Whereas like France, like are just humming along like a sort of a tournament team. Maybe not having played particularly well in any game necessarily, and yet playing Morocco in a semi final where they'll be strongly fancied, but yeah, the referee stuff. Like I did think I was at the England France game, so I wasn't in the Morocco stadium. But even coming through the TV, like you could sense that from when Morocco scored, Portugal were in that crisis mode, almost like a team that's 1-0 down in a cup tie to a lower league
Mm.
side, and their response isn't to be calm and to be patient. It was to be completely caught up in the moment. Like even before half time, like Bruno Fernandes had the penalty shout, but they were so flustered over that they should have conceded a second on the break before half time.
Yeah.
Like they completely
Mm-hmm.
lost their discipline. And across the second half, I mean, that was the thing. Whereas like we are better than this. We know we are better than this, and they did have a couple of decent chances in the opening 20 minutes. But I mean, in the last 10, 15 minutes, okay, classic again. Winners right to history stuff. I mean, Pepe was presented with a free header. From close
Mm-hmm.
range, that we say Morocco defended perfectly, but they actually did ship that chance
No.
if it's scored. But in terms of some of the Portuguese delivery towards the end, like corners not beating the first man, deliveries like for really good tactical players.
Yeah.
They it was a little bit of a bottle job really. And
It
Morocco
was.
have loads of bottle, and I mean the caveat to square that Pepe point back around in Morocco's favour is that, to be fair to them, and you would appreciate this as the centre half who knows about like stability within a side and so on. I mean, they've lost their first choice central defenders,
Yeah.
and yet they've managed to they've lost one of the first choice fullbacks, like key players, and
Yeah.
yet they still managed to retain like the same unit to a point, and
Yeah.
they deserved it.
They absolutely did. Yeah. It was astonishing to watch players of the caliber of Bernardo Silva, Bruno Fernandes, with a team like that. I know you've got Ronaldo in the box, so there's a sort of a Peter Crouch thing comes into your head of, we've got a great header in the box, let's cross the ball. But they were crossing it from just inside their half at times. There was no element of let's try and,
Yeah.
create something and create good movements. It's a very niche market. The defensive heading from Morocco was incredible at times. It was height and distance. Every header was bang. There was none of those little ones that, drop to somebody on the edge of the box to smack it in from 20 yards out. Every one of them was almost every one of them was brilliant. And it gets to a certain point where obviously there's a different judgment of underdogs versus you judge them differently. So in terms of possession, no, they didn't. Portugal had more possession, etc. But in terms of actually, chances to win the game or chances to score, I mean, Morocco had one at the end where they should have scored as well. They should have wrapped it up, won the game 2-0. Um, very, very little sympathy for Portugal. And it was astonishing for a team as experienced as they are. And unlike England, they do have players who have tournament winning experience, a bit older, etc. And they were getting the ball and just launching it into the box. It was a bit like the Dutch the previous night, but without Weghorst in there to cause absolute chaos. And like, look, I don't. We'll talk about Morocco more when we preview the game against France. But in terms of Portugal, like Ronaldo in tears going down the tunnel again, a bit like England. Some people revelled in it. Some people thought, fair enough. If you break it down, it's his last chance of a World Cup, etc. He did okay. He had a good shot. He didn't blow it. He didn't do anything like that. He had a chance. He hit the target. Keeper made a good save. But I was incredibly disappointed with Portugal. And again, they as you said, they just peaked too early. Whether they started to believe a bit of their own stuff, because we certainly believed the hype around them, and Morocco again underestimated and made people pay for underestimating them.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe in some ways where they're going to be the anti-Spain, like they're not going to just play around the edges of Morocco and wait for something to happen. So let's get it in the mixer. Except, as you mentioned, is they just didn't like they couldn't do it effectively. And yeah, the Ronaldo one, I mean, the camera's always going to follow him, right? Like he uses that to his advantage when he wants. I'd be more leaning towards sympathy for him yesterday than, and I have no sympathy for him in any other situation of anything that's happened in recent
Mm-hmm.
months. Like, but I still believe that when it's the finality of you being finished in that, no matter how vain and narcissistic you are, I still, every footballer struggles when they become an ex-pro, no matter how arrogant or conceited they might be. Um, it's still a great leveler for them, and knowing it's done, I believe that emotion is real. And
Yeah.
would he
He's
handle
almost
that?
become an ex-pro while still playing. Like it's
Yeah, yeah.
peculiar
Well,
scenario.
I suppose. I mean, will he ever gain perspective from how he handled the tournament? I mean, like who knows? You that's the thing. Maybe not. Or maybe do you analyze the tears and say, well, is part of it, just like disappointment for yourself, or does part of you've got a ball to this competition really in some ways,
Yeah.
as much as like he was no better or worse than anyone. Like he was in positions, at times, like you could say the service was poor. They obviously had that run down the side that 3 or 4 years ago he probably would have turned it into a goal. But I mean, it wasn't even a bad
Mm-hmm.
shot that he got away that one as well. It was just
Yeah.
like it was a tough one. Um, but yeah, like this is the thing. I mean, it's knockout football. Like that's the thing. Like it's you talk about the World Cup as though it establishes some kind of hierarchy. It sort of it sort of sorts out sort of the pecking order of teams. But sometimes it's just no. It's just about like a knockout team that really has these, that in a moment. And I think Gary Breen, again, to reference Gary mentioned in the column, like the teams can elevate themselves sometimes in a tournament in a way that they'll never do again. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is their perfect moment. Like they're in that sort of harmony that they'll never maybe hit those heights ever again. And like some teams are in that sweet spot right now. Um, Morocco are just a classic example of that. And strange because when Brazil lost to Croatia, there is that maybe lingering sense of disappointment, as much as disrespectful to Croatia,
Yeah.
but that you don't get the Argentina Brazil. France Portugal would be a better technical affair, you would think, but I I actually am strangely coming around to feeling the France Morocco, with all the history, the symbolism,
Yeah.
the atmosphere would be created, maybe a better semi-final. Like it might be a better event than a slightly more sterile France beating Portugal 1-0, which you could easily see happening. I sort of feel like
Yeah.
anything. We'll preview these games obviously across the week, but I sort of feel like anything could happen, and like the history contained within that occasion um, is going to be powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's always good to have teams from different regions in semi-finals. We have France, Morocco on Wednesday, and Argentina, Croatia on Tuesday. We'll be back on Tuesday to preview those games. That was the Indo World Cup, and we'll be back, as I said, on Tuesday to preview Argentina, Croatia. Watch us on YouTube or independent.ie, or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks.